Equalizer 2 is directed by Antoine Fuqua and stars Denzel Washington as Robert McCall, and he returns from the first movie, and while operating as a Lyft driver, he is acting as a somewhat vigilante to protect people and to save people, and also to, of course, equalize people. However, when a person close to him becomes hurt, he has to go on a revenge mission in order to find the person who did this, find the motivation, and to put a stop to it all, and of course, equalize the situation. Now, I liked the first Equalizer. I thought it was a fine movie. I thought it was an interesting film. You know, get to see a Denzel action film is never a bad thing. And I thought the first movie was okay. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's particularly anything too great, but it was a fun, disposable film in my opinion. So I was interested to see that this was actually the movie that Denzel decided to do a sequel to, because this is of course Denzel Washington's first ever sequel. So I was interested to see what drew him in order to do a sequel to The Equalizer, when, it was quite surprising that out of all the films he's ever done in his career, The Equalizer was the one that got the sequel. Now, Denzel Washington is absolutely incredible in this film, as he is in everything. I mean, the man is a legend. He is a true legend within Hollywood, a true movie star. There are only a couple of people left in Hollywood who I consider to be true movie stars, and they are Denzel Washington and Tom Cruise. They are two actors who, even if they're in terrible films, they will put you through it. Like, they will get you through that movie because of their true star power. And Denzel, once again, just smiles his way through this movie. He has so much charisma, so much personality, such a great presence on screen, and he was a great lead to take me through this film. Also, Ashton Sanders, who's from Moonlight, plays a awesome character known Miles in this film, and he was really good here. Really impressed me. He has a lot of good emotional moments. His character's got a really interesting backstory. They actually go through a lot of lots of twists and turns with this character, a lot of ups and downs. I think he was actually a really great addition to the film, and the rapport between him and Denzel Washington's character of Robert McCall was so well realized. I thought they were a really awesome pair. They were kind of like, a father and son figure, and it was just a really nice relationship, and it was easily the most interesting and compelling part of the movie for me, in comparison to a lot of other stuff in the movie that just kind of goes under the carpet. This was a lot more interesting. Antoine Fuqua does return behind the camera as the director of this film, and this film is also very well directed. That's one thing I will say about the first one. It's very well directed, really well helmed, some beautiful cinematography in that first movie. And in this film, while it didn't impress me as much with the camera work or the cinematography as the first movie did, it's still very well directed in its own right, and I think Antoine Fuqua again did an excellent job with this movie, as he did with the first one, and also with other movies he's directed, such as Training Day or the Magnificent Seven reboot. I think he's really done a good job as a director of late, and while, like I said, this movie wasn't as impressive as the first movie directing wise, it was still really good in its own right. Now, while all that's great in this movie, I have a lot of negatives that really drag this movie down. This movie took about an hour and 15 minutes to actually get going. Now, obviously, you could probably hear a lot of people say that when they talk about lots of different films, when they say, oh, it took about a good half an hour to get going, and that's pretty average. But for this, an hour and 15 minutes. I was checking my watch. I checked my watch, but an hour and 15 minutes in, and the movie went, right, let's go. And it was just so annoying. This is because the movie couldn't decide what storyline it wanted to do. The first hour and 15 minutes of this movie, it's exploring about 4 different storylines because it doesn't quite know which one it wants to do, and it goes, oh, screw it, let's just do them all. And it literally gives equal screen time to all of them, which you could see as a positive. You could see that as, oh, it balanced the time. But it makes the film feel unfocused because it doesn't know which one to focus on. It doesn't know which storylines to actually go along. And only when it gets to the hour and 15 mark does it go, okay, we're doing this storyline, and it goes straight down and abandons all the other ones, and everything is just left hanging in the wind, and it's kind of a really frustrating part of the movie. Like I said, this makes the film feel really slow and boring. I think that, the first hour and 15 minutes are really boring. It meanders along, going through all these different storylines where we see Robert McCall meeting with plenty of different people and going along their own separate storylines, and it just wasn't entertaining. I think the movie was really quite dull and quite drab, and I think that was really a big letdown for this film. Now, granted, once it hits that hour and 15 mark, the last 45 minutes are rather entertaining. I think that those last 45 minutes, were easily the best part of the movie. They were easily the part of the movie that I was most invested in and the part of the movie that I was most excited about. I mean, it wasn't edge of my seat excited, but, it was still, in comparison to the rest of the movie, it was exhilarating. And it was really interesting to see that last 45 minutes completely skyrocket in comparison to the rest of the movie, but it wasn't good enough to save it. Also, the final fight in this movie, this big final action set piece that the movie has in the last sort of 10-15 minutes of the movie, it's pretty much identical to the first one, except the setting's a bit different, because in the first one, obviously, you had this big warehouse, and there was about 5 guys in there, and you got to see Robert McCall take out each one by one. Very Batman-esque. And again, here, it basically takes place on a small island, and you have, again, about 5 different guys, and you get to see Robert McCall take them all out one by one very slowly, and you get to see how he precisely does it while also keeping himself alive. And while it's good, and it's a good action sequence, again, it just didn't feel very original because it felt very similar to what they did in the first movie with Denzel and Antoine Fuqua, who again, of course, come back together for this movie. It just felt like a very similar idea and a very similar concept, so it didn't feel original or as exciting as it should have been because it was just too much of a carbon copy from what we got before. Overall, The Equalizer 2 was a very disappointing and very underwhelming sequel. Like I said, I think the first movie is very, very enjoyable, but to take that movie and go to this, it was just an extremely boring and dull ride that felt very drab all over. I think that this movie, you know, it takes a real good hour and 15 minutes before the movie actually goes, right, let's do this, and it goes off on its own storyline. And once you get to that point, the movie is entertaining enough, but it's not good enough to the point where it actually says, oh yeah, that was all a good build-up, because it wasn't a good build-up. It was just a real slow burn. And it wasn't even a slow burn because it wasn't building up to this storyline. It's just, once it gets to that point, it decides what storyline it wants to do, and it just abandons everything else and leaves so many dangling plot threads that it is really frustrating. And while Denzel will definitely get you through this movie, and the relationship between him and Miles is a great part of the film, it's just not that great of a film on the whole. So did you guys see The Equalizer 2? If you did, make sure you tell me all your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. Did you like the movie? Did you hate it? Let's have a great discussion about The Equalizer 2 in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, if you want to see more movie reviews from me, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. And I hope to see you guys again in my next video.